Good morning, North America. Welcome to the Knowledge Series 2020, the Riyadh edition. This is the second installment of the emerging markets segment of the Knowledge Series, where we look at transformation in the legal industry in India, Saudi Arabia, and Nigeria. Today, you'll be part of a conversation with those on the ground in Saudi Arabia who are driving that transformation and others who are doing business there. We'll also look at three forces that have converged globally to spark this transformation: technology, litigation funding, and new laws themselves. And of course, we can't ignore how the recent pandemic has accelerated that change and disrupted the status quo. What makes the Knowledge Series unique is that it's an unscripted, interactive dialogue. So it's up to you to react, engage, and challenge the panelists. Please ask questions, raise your hand, and use the chat rooms. We'll be watching, and we will incorporate your comments into the conversation. So with that said, let's spend the next hour getting to know each other, exchanging ideas, and building our community. Now, I will actually hand you off to my colleague, Rachel Pether, as long as we don't have any technical issues. And Rachel will be our moderator for today's webinar. So thank you, and Ramadan Kareem. You may have seen a survey that came up when we began. I don't know if we have the results for that poll yet, but we wanted to sort of challenge, and we wanted to also stimulate you to look at really all this sort of hype that we hear about technology in the legal sector and blockchain. So when we get back to it, when we get the results, we'll show those. Given that this webinar is focusing on Saudi Arabia, let's start there. We have some experts on this panel who have been doing business in Saudi Arabia. Jihad, could you please begin by giving us an overview on where Saudi Arabia stands today in the legal industry and what have been some of the major advancements as well as challenges in the past 2 years?
Sure. So, hello everyone. Ramadan Kareem. Kul aam wa antum bikhair. First of all, this is Jihad Turkestani. I'm the co-managing partner of STAT. I have more than 15 years of experience practicing as an attorney in Saudi Arabia, focusing on litigation and corporate M&A. Back to your question, Dilip, and looking at Saudi Arabia, not in the very far past, recently Saudi Arabia started an initiative towards e-government and introducing technology in government and government services. Very recently, I remember the government's main focus was bringing government staff up to speed on using technology, and there were programs that were preliminary at the time. Since then, which is less than a decade ago, now Saudi Arabia has made very interesting steps towards transformation into technology. For example, and as part of attracting foreign investments and also facilitating local investments and promoting local content, you see that most of the services by the Ministry of Commerce are done electronically, and also by the Saudi Arabian General Investment Authority, SAGIA, now known as the Ministry of Investment. So definitely there has been progress, significant progress. In terms of the legal world, we see that the judiciary is also improving. It's also its electronic services and platforms. Many services right now are being provided electronically to facilitate litigation and to save effort and time of doing it in the old-fashioned way. So definitely Saudi Arabia is seeing this transformation is progressing and excelling at a very accelerated pace at the moment, and the improvement has been noticed, and it's been impressive so far.
Great, thank you so much, Jihad. Rizana, You yourself represent change and transformation in Saudi Arabia. You're an entrepreneur, you're leading a dispute resolution practice. Could you please tell us from your perspective if you're the changes that you see in the dispute resolution arena and even in the way that you've developed your practice and the reaction to your practice?
Thank you, Dilip. Hi, everyone. I'm delighted to be part of this wonderful event. I'm an accredited mediator and the founder of Taswiya Consultancy in Saudi Arabia. In fact, I'd like to build on what Jihad just mentioned in terms of the country has taken major steps towards technology. I founded Taswiya in 2015 when awareness on mediation was very weak. Then SCCA started, Saudi Center for Commercial Arbitration started offering training programs for mediation, and the Ministry of Justice set up a virtual platform for virtual mediation and started to take in registrations for mediators, which exceeded 17,000, where 40% of that were women. Now, today, the Saudi Center for Commercial Arbitration launched its emergency mediation platform for virtual mediation, which is considered a huge step towards mediation in the region, and especially in Saudi Arabia. And after signing the Singapore Convention, which made this the fifth country to sign that convention. So I see that major steps have been taken towards technology in dispute resolution in Saudi Arabia.
Thank you for that, Rosanna. Marcus, you're senior legal counsel of one of the largest contracting companies in the region. You've handled a lot of high-profile infrastructure projects in Saudi Arabia. Anybody who knows infrastructure knows that all such projects end in disputes. Could you tell us a little bit about your experience in trying to resolve those disputes and what you might like to see as changes from your perspective? And maybe we can get Jihad and Rosanna to promote some of those changes as well.
Sure thing. Well, first of all, Ramadan Mubarak, Ramadan Kareem to all participants and all panelists. I'm very honored to be part of this very prolific panel. I also am very grateful for this opportunity to share with you the perspective from the in-house legal counsel side on behalf of the companies that, in my eyes, without any cockiness or conceited approach, are the actual end users. It is the companies, the contractors, developers. They are the ones who, by way of their in-house counsels, will actually decide on what technologies to use, if any new technologies at all, within their form of dispute resolution, in particular with regard to projects in Saudi Arabia. As to me, personally, I've been in-house counsel in the construction industry with a specialization in construction law and arbitration law for the past 15 years now, in particular based in the GCC, Saudi Arabia and the UAE. And when it comes to the many disputes, as you said, there hardly is a complex construction project, infrastructure project without a dispute. There are two things that immediately jump into one's eyes. One is that, especially when you're in a JV with international players, with companies from all corners of the world, there is this huge reluctance to interact with Saudi institutions, with Saudi law. And that leads to a kind of dichotomy that although you have a project in Saudi Arabia, although you are interacting with Saudi authorities and you're dealing with Saudi issues, such as, you know, the potential claims of third parties, property issues, you have this drive, sometimes built on misconceptions and misunderstandings, to have, in most cases, English law govern the contract, and to have, as a form of dispute resolution, arbitration under ICC rules in London, with the seat of arbitration in London. And this actually leads to the second point that marks this relationship, which is that you cannot always achieve that change. And very often you have templates of government contracts that leave you almost zero chance to reword, rephrase the terms and conditions. And so very often in the upstream case, towards the client, the employer, the developer, who in most cases is a government entity or government owned, you have a different form of dispute resolution. You even have a different law applied on the contract, as opposed to in your downstream cases with your design subcontractors, other subcontractors, with your suppliers. And this brings its own risks and uncertainty towards or to your project. It might even lead to conflicting decisions, conflicting resolutions to potential conflicts.
Thank you, Marcus. Linda, in your role as CEO of the ADGM courts and the arbitration center, you've really seen a lot of transformation in the region as a whole. Could you talk about that a little bit in terms of the way the courts have moved, the arbitration laws, et cetera? What do you see from your perspective across the region?
Absolutely, thanks, Sir. And welcome to everybody to today's webinar on behalf of the ADGM Arbitration Centre. It's absolutely brilliant to see you all participating in this, and to our panelists, it's amazing to have this perspective on Saudi Arabia. So to pick up that point, Dilip, we've seen a lot of transformation, and particularly with Saudi, it was really interesting. I had a look at the World Bank 2020 Doing Business report this morning, and Saudi is the most improved country of all countries in this latest report, which is really interesting. And part of the reason for that, this report had said, was the transformation of the neighboring countries, of the movement in the region, and particularly with the UAE being number 16 on the list, which is extraordinarily high. That has, if you like, has permeated throughout the region, leading to this extraordinary transformation. But we're seeing from the Arbitration Centre, in the collaboration that we've had, particularly with the Saudi Centre for Commercial Arbitration, an enormous uptick in an embrace of technology and an embrace of changing the regulatory framework, changing the way dispute resolution is done, and being more flexible. And I think that has been driven a lot by government, to pick up the point that Gia had and Rosanna made earlier, that government has been driving that, and it's been driven here in the UAE, particularly with the Abu Dhabi government, is that transformation, is that pushing towards technology, entrepreneurialism, innovation, and really making the efficiency of business and the transformation of business using technology an utmost priority. So for us as a state-of-the-art arbitration centre, what we're seeing is a lot of collaboration across the region in being able to develop new laws, if you like, new rules, guidelines, all sorts of things that are really bringing this region into becoming a poster child of transformation, I'd have to say. It has been extraordinary. And I can see the drive continuing, and the current crisis, I think, has only fueling it, if you like, has put fuel on the fire that already existed there. So it's a pretty exciting time, to be honest, with transformation across the region.
Thank you, Linda. So speaking of fuel on the fire and transformation, I'm going to turn to Sunil Gokhale. Sunil, you yourself have been a lawyer by profession. You've worked in large law firms, sovereign funds. You made the transition into being a venture capitalist, and you've done business in Saudi Arabia. You have an office in Saudi Arabia. You've done business in Silicon Valley, business in Bangalore, in India. Could you talk a little bit of what you see on the ground in Saudi Arabia in terms of the startup ecosystem, where they are in terms of in migration towards knowledge-based startups, et cetera, and from your perspective, what you see across the region as well, and even as a former lawyer, frankly, though former is a qualifier.
I think you forgot to mention, I don't think I was a very good lawyer, hence the transition. Well, thank you, Dilip. My name is Sunil Gokhale, one of the founding partners of VentureSoup, which is a VC firm based here in the UAE, but highly active in Saudi Arabia and across the rest of the MENA region and globally. And pleasure being here, enjoying this panel today. I think obviously as a venture capitalist, we are bullish on the role generally of technology in terms of a key driver of innovation. And we've, as you mentioned, we've invested globally and seen some of these trends play out in a number of different markets, including the US and India and Asia, Africa, and of course here at home. In terms of, right now we're in a very, very unique time in history, given everything that's happening around COVID-19. And so we, have noticed that during this period, and as we look out to, what the new world looks like in a post-COVID-19 world, we very much agree with Linda's thesis that this time will, innovation will continue to happen. Technology and new forms of consumer behavior patterns will continue to emerge. But really, this time will actually probably accelerate that, and we're already seeing that happen in various sectors, such as fintech and health tech, in particularly, sectors adjacent to e-commerce, as that becomes a more viable option for people, given the lack of opportunity to go to physical stores and things like that, and a number of other subsectors within technology as a whole. And so, we think that trend will also play out in this region and in Saudi Arabia. We've been very, very active in Saudi over the last 2.5 years, and we've made about 8 investments there, early stage investments in technology, and we're quite bullish on the Saudi story from a technology standpoint, particularly as myself focusing a fair amount of my time on fintech. I'm seeing fintech adoption happening, companies being built, founders really coming up with solutions that will play out, we think, well in Saudi. And it's not just the quality of the founders and the private market, but really the government has done a fantastic job in Saudi, like here in the UAE, in terms of promoting fintech adoption, working with regulators and banks and other financial institutions. So we think we're very, very bullish on the Saudi story. We're very active here. We have a Saudi partner. Prior to obviously travel restrictions, someone from the team was in Saudi at least once a week, not including our partner on the ground. So, we think the Saudi story is strong, and we will continue to invest a significant amount of capital over the next 5-10 years in Saudi, and look forward to watching the ecosystem develop and start to look more like other more developed technology ecosystems in the world, whether that's Silicon Valley, whether that's Bangalore, whether that's other places that where fintech adoption in particular has happened quite rapidly.
Sunil, let's talk a little bit about COVID-19 and what impact you all may have seen in your practices, and your daily pursuits. Jihad, you as a practicing attorney on the ground in Saudi Arabia, what are you seeing in the way that COVID-19 has impacted practice of law in Saudi Arabia today? And who was prepared for this disruption, and who wasn't?
Right. So yes, we definitely saw an impact on the legal industry, and looking at all the stakeholders and also clients' behaviors based on the COVID-19 situation. For example, courts in Saudi Arabia started rolling out or electronic hearings, although it's not implemented fully, but the plan is there, and we expect that to take place soon. However, we've seen that courts in Saudi Arabia started using the electronic and technology platform that was developed in an accelerated way. So we've been, although there are no hearings, we've been seeing, for example, certain judgments being issued on cases that were ready for judgment and were under deliberation. We're seeing that you can still file your claims. You're still able to do so many things with the technological platform, although there has been a delay in holding hearings, and I think that's an international problem, not only in Saudi Arabia. On the other side, we see that arbitration is moving faster, and we see that certain arbitration cases are moving and going ahead because of the technology platform, and because also thanks to the Saudi legislator, that we have right now the implementing regulations of the arbitration law that allows for electronic hearings and hearings to be done electronically. So we are proceeding on that front. Definitely, we've seen as a global impact, we've seen certain practices and areas go slow, obviously, but we're seeing also certain practices also picking up. So our clients who are active in IT, who are active in e-commerce, are still and actually going at an accelerated pace right now. We're seeing them very active and demanding from us to provide them with the support that they need, because their businesses on the other side, because of the COVID-19 situation, is booming. So it's interesting to see that while there is a slowdown in certain areas and sectors, that it's picking up in others in Saudi Arabia. And Saudi Arabia is not isolated from the international community. So it's definitely a reflection of what's happening internationally, and we see that in Saudi Arabia as well.
Great, thank you, Jihad. Rosanna, let me ask you, what are you seeing in terms of mediation practice in Saudi Arabia given COVID-19? Has there been an uptick in mediation? Has mediation been a dispute resolution solution that was well suited for this moment?
Well, during crisis, parties are usually eager to resort to an amicable form of dispute resolution. And people have been trying to understand more about mediation and willing to try it. On the other hand, I've seen lawyers who have become very interested in learning about mediation, in wanting to collaborate with mediators, which is very interesting. It's an interesting time for mediation today because it's virtually, it's a very, we can actually practice mediation virtually without any complications. And that's the whole point. During a crisis, people want to resort to something that's straightforward and is hassle-free.
Well, Rosanna, let me play devil's advocate a little bit. When you talk about virtual mediation, let's say, is it really that effective? Because people will say that mediation works when a mediator can read body language from both sides and facilitate towards a solution. So how is technology affecting the effectiveness of mediation?
Well, I can't deny that there are some challenges associated with virtual mediation. First of all, the absence of body language, which is very important to a mediation process. Another thing is, in physical mediation, the mediator has control over who is attending the session, whereas a virtual mediation, you have no control over who's in the room, who's attending, people you can't see who may actually have an effect on the process or the decisions being taken by the parties, and this is very important. So yes, there are challenges, but there are also opportunities, such as the time associated with resolving the dispute. Virtually, you can't really spend hours and hours, mediating. So it will be happening over, let's say, 2-3 sessions, 90 minutes each, instead of 7-8 hours a day. Also, the costs associated will be much lower than physical mediation.
Thank you. That's very interesting and very insightful. Marcus, can you share with us how COVID-19 has affected the way that you're handling projects, handling issues that may arise on projects, and perhaps even cash flow and your legal spends? Does this make you look at how you use your dollars in terms of disputes and contracts, et cetera?
Absolutely. Thank you, Dilip. You're raising the right points, because if there's one word that best describes the current situation, it is uncertainty. Uncertainty with regard to the current projects, uncertainty in particular with regard to future projects. And in these times of uncertainty, of course, the urges to be very restrictive when it comes to expenditure. And as an in-house counsel, I kind of wear two hats. One hat is that of the lawyer, The other hat is that of the senior staff member that is part of the management. So wearing my lawyer's hat, I do see the benefits with the restrictions coming forward with the outbreak of the virus, the lockdown. I see the benefits in using modern technology, and I see them and their use being accelerated by these restrictions coming from the lockdown. However, I need to take a whole different angle, and contrary also to what my esteemed colleague Jihad just described, when I wear the hat of the senior staff member involved in the management, because there is this concern, this very valid, justified concern about liquidity, and the management is taking a whole different approach with regard to dispute resolution. It's no longer about tackling a dispute by way of arbitration and taking into account the advanced expenses that need to be made, the traveling, such as between London and Saudi Arabia, the time that an arbitration will take. Now the outlook, and that's why I'm very glad that also Rosanna is part of this panel, is to definitely look into and genuinely look into alternative forms of dispute resolution, such as mediation. In the past, and me included, mediation was never taken really seriously. Mediation was a pass-through to reach the level of arbitration. Mediation was a requirement for the arbitration. It was a box that you ticked off a list. And now with these concerns for money and time, where the need is there in these uncertain times to get a quick solution, to get a quick settlement, we are genuinely considering mediation as a form to achieve that settlement. And in that process, and that is very interesting, we're redefining mediation. You see, mediation in its core initially was a kind of psychological, diplomatic back and forth between two antagonized opposing sides, where the mediator was not necessarily required to be an expert in the area of the dispute, but more somebody with strong people skills to help the two opposing sides overcome their animosity towards each other. But now with dispute, we are thinking of mediation more as a form of a hybrid form, close to expert determination, where the mediator should be an expert in the field, where we're even including or taking into account the option to have the mediator give a conclusion, give his opinion, give his, in most cases, of course, non-binding opinion, but to be able, to have the opposing side see what are their chances should they want to pursue the matter to arbitration, if the mediation already, in his opinion, judges, validates the success rate of the claims or counterclaims. So on one hand, we're going into that direction. On the other hand, because of that shortage of cash, we are also much more taking into account, toying with the idea of litigation funding. So we've not entirely given up arbitration, but definitely with a new approach to financing the arbitration. And I remember a discussion I had previously with Linda on that matter, where Linda raised a very important point that I would like to grab. This makes us, and now I'm taking my lawyer's hat on again, in the obligation, in the duty to present those new forms of technology in a very simple and straightforward manner. Because what we want to avoid is that, especially those companies, and in most cases government-owned companies or government entities themselves, could have a certain reluctance and could mistake these new forms of technology as tools of guerrilla tactics. Things that they are not familiar with will be things that they will definitely reject. And here comes our role as lawyers, as legal counsels, especially by way of this webinar, to present those and to create and enhance the familiarity with those means of technology.
Marcus. We've got quite a few questions that have come up. So I'm just going to start going through the questions. Some of them are pointed to specific panelists, but I'm going to start with one that isn't. And Linda, I'm going to put this one to you. As you know, the knowledge series is unscripted. So Linda, in your experience, how viable are smart contracts and are they being used currently? To what extent? Although it may offer the highest security, are there any possible threats? And this question comes from Harshita Vadlamudi. So Harshita, thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the question. We haven't seen them used very much. How viable they are, I think a lot of people say they're extremely viable. There's a big push for them, but we haven't seen them very much, to be quite honest. My personal view is there needs a little bit more out there on them, to be perfectly honest, and it needs a little bit more nuanced. And if I could, if you'll allow me, Dilip, in this kind of unscripted environment, perhaps to pick up the question of Michael Patrick Joyce, I see there about the new skills of legal practitioners that need to be acquired to best meet client expectations and needs in this post-COVID-19 environment. And maybe this fits in, if you'll allow me, segue a little bit into the previous question, is I'm picking up a point of Marcus's as well, is I think legal practitioners now need to develop and deliver for clients flexibility. I think that strategies have to change far more quickly now with the way things are developing, and they will develop quickly. Clients will, I see, go through various cycles now as they rationalize and as they analyze just exactly what the financial situation is. And I think now lawyers need to be strategies. I think lawyers have always thought, well, a strategy is only good as it is for a particular time and a particular defense or claim, whatever else it is. But I think more so than ever, and perhaps this is where the technology side of things like smart contracts, whatever, this flexibility, new ideas, changing, mixing up the ideas, lots of discussion now on arbitration, mediation, arbitration and how that works, expert determination. I think a lot more needs to be done now by legal practitioners in having a suite of things to offer clients and how it's costed and how technology intervenes in all of that and how it needs to intervene simply. I think dumping sophisticated technology just for the sake of it into dispute resolution will be a mistake, frankly. So it's a personal view. I think that, and that is kind of one of my predictions, is I think that early movers very quickly and precipitously in injecting technology into dispute resolution may not be the best idea. It may need to work itself out. It may need to fall out a little bit more. But I think I may be a little bit less on the technology, I think aggressive front. I'm a little bit more moderate at the moment. And I wasn't moderate before COVID. But I feel like COVID has now need to deliver a little bit of moderation and less precipitous decision making.
That's very fascinating. Thanks for that. Jihad, if I can turn to you on that point, what skills lawyers will need to adapt to survive? And one thing I will tell you that we've seen in the emerging markets is you kind of have a generational change going on, where you've got lawyers from the old generation who are used to the old way of doing things, and then you've got a young generation that is eager for change. And so we'd love to hear from you as to what you think the skill sets are that lawyers need in this new era and how they're going to adapt and survive. And to whatever extent you're comfortable, what do you see a changing of the guard from your perspective?
Right. So that's a very interesting point you're bringing, Dilip. And I think it's very important right now for lawyers to be up to speed with the technology and the new trends that are happening. And in Saudi Arabia in particular, we're seeing that we have our older generation of legal practitioners and judges who are our mentors, and we have the utmost respect for them on the law and the substance of the law, but on the new trends and what's happening in terms of progression in technology and how business is being done, they will need to be, or they need to be brought up to speed to understand all of that. On the other side, we're seeing a younger generation that is going so fast, they are so ambitious that they want to move and drive the change forward. And I think finding that balance is important, and lawyers who are practicing need to understand the trends, and even the younger generation. For example, I'm going back to e-contracts and the point Marcus and Linda just discussed right now. We do have electronic contracts in Saudi Arabia. We do have the legal platform for it. We do have the law that allows for it. We have the technology with telecommunication companies and technology companies that are providing the service. However, we see that clients want and in the private sector want to implement that. However, when it goes to lawyers, some of the lawyers would come back and say, really, we don't know. And really, if the lawyer doesn't know how this would work, how would the judge rule on it? And we don't have enough right now to see how the judiciary would react to these situations. But we do have that platform, and I think that's an example of where we need to bring all legal practitioners up to speed on the trends on how and what the client demands are, and what the business demands are going. And that applies internationally, not only to Saudi Arabia. And that brings us also to another topic of discussion, which is the older generation who may not be fully up to speed, and the newer generation that is taking over in Saudi Arabia. We're seeing them taking over from the older generation, and how to benefit from both, from the ambition and energy of the newer generation and the wisdom and guidance of our older generation. It is working in Saudi Arabia. We see some examples that are not perfect, but then who is perfect? But it is, we are painting a beautiful picture and scene for the future. And we can see that we will land beautifully very soon in terms of benefiting from the wisdom of our mentors, and also the ambition and energy of our newer generation that have the international know-how and have the drive and ambition towards change.
Thank you, Jihad. That's a very poignant insight, almost similar to Linda, what you were saying about the moderate take-up in technology as well. We've got quite a few questions for Rosanna, so I'm going to turn to some of those. The first one is from Jane Elizabeth Landon. Rosanna, what sort of cases are referred to mediation in Saudi Arabia generally? Can you give a breakdown between civil, commercial, and family disputes? Do women mediators have a legal qualification in Saudi Arabia? And lastly, she asked, is she right to believe that women were only recently allowed to practice law in Saudi Arabia? I know that's a lot to cover, and I'm happy to repeat those questions for you. So please, if you can give a breakdown and what sort of cases are referred, etc. Thank you.
Well, most of the cases I've come across in Saudi Arabia are a lot of family business disputes, multinational companies. They're very eager to resort to mediation. As Marcus said, no one wants to enter the system of litigation in Saudi, especially if you're not a Saudi yourself. So it's much easier to resort to mediation in this case. In terms of construction, the appetite on mediation isn't that great. I think what happens with construction disputes, they prefer to resort to arbitration. Not many are mediated, to be honest, in this case. What was the other question? Will mediation be a first? There's a question here. Will it be the first to resort for dispute resolution versus arbitration and mediation? This is where the country is heading towards. That mediation is your first step, where you state it clearly in your commercial contracts in the dispute resolution clause. That mediation is stated clearly, and this is the first step you take before you resort to arbitration. Especially that now mediation ends with an enforceable bond, which was previously an impediment for a lot of disputes, where people said, what's the point of going to mediation if we won't be able to enforce it in court? Should we need to do that? So yes, that's where we're heading towards. Mediation is a first step. So yes, mediation before arbitration, for sure.
And Rosanna, do women mediators have a legal qualification in Saudi Arabia? Do you need to be a lawyer to be a mediator? And how recently were women recently allowed to practice law in Saudi Arabia, or has that always been the case? And Jihad, feel free to answer that question as well.
You don't have to be a lawyer to practice mediation in Saudi Arabia, and we've had women lawyers, and of course Jihad will add to that for some time now. So we don't have that problem. And as I mentioned earlier, the Ministry of Justice received over 8,000 registrations, all females. They wanted to register as mediators. So we don't have that problem. What you need as a female mediator is the background and the experience, because you need to build credibility here. And this is what I faced when I started my consultancy in 2015. The fact that I had 14 years of corporate banking experience, my financial background gave credibility. And at this point, people weren't looking at me as a female. They were looking at me as a professional who knows what she's doing. She's got the right experience to resolve this dispute. So at this point in Saudi Arabia, we're not really looking whether you're a man or a woman. We're looking at the qualifications. If you're qualified, then you're welcome to come and mediate. And I hope we have a large number of female mediators in the near future. I'm looking forward to that.
Great, thank you. I'm just going to go through some of the questions here, and we've got quite a few. Marcus, this is a reaction to what you were talking about, mediation as well. Seems like a lot of people have picked up on the mediation theme in today's dialogue. Picking on Marcus's, this comes from Michael Patchett Joyce, I believe it is. Picking on Marcus's comments, in many parts of the world, mediation is facilitated. In China and Southeast Asia, an evaluative approach is favored. Should we offer evaluative mediation, that is determinative assessment by a neutral? Maybe you can comment on that, Marcus. And Linda, please, if you'd like to comment as well.
Sure. So just to explain what it means to avoid any misunderstanding or confusion, facilitative mediation would be the approach where the mediator doesn't give an opinion, where he just goes back and forth between the parties and tries to get them to agree on a settlement. Evaluative mediation means where the mediator comes up with his evaluation of the claims and counterclaims and gives usually a non-binding opinion and says, this is a strong claim or this is a very weak claim, poorly substantiated. I would never give a general answer because it all depends on the nature of the dispute. And that's why it is far better to keep it open in your contract. Definitely include a mediation clause in your contract. Usually you'd have the mediation after the parties themselves and their senior managers failed to reach a settlement negotiation. And the next step, especially before going to arbitration, would be to appoint a mediator. In most cases, the mediator is not even mentioned in the contract, which also makes a lot of sense because depending on the exact timing of the dispute, you need to make sure that the mediator you have in mind is available. And then depending on the nature of the dispute, depending on whether there is, for example, a likelihood of serious and detailed counterclaims, what is the nature of these counterclaims, you can then decide whether you just want to have a mediator play the facilitative role, meaning he won't even properly look into how valid the claims are. He will just try to facilitate a solution. Or you definitely want him, especially to avoid then having to go to arbitration, to give that evaluation because you think it could be a genuine means to kill the dispute in the bud and avoid a lengthy, expensive arbitration. So it all depends on the nature of the dispute. And that is important to make it depend on the nature of the dispute.
Thank you, Marcus. Just trying to pull up another chat, another question that we saw. This, I'll submit this to the floor. So whoever wants to answer this, please raise your hand. We'll unmute you, etc. Do you feel, this comes from Mayur Pujara. Do you foresee a common digital platform for business contracts based on blockchain technology in the GCC, which may further allow a similar mediation and arbitration process to promote business and trade? It's a bit challenging, that question, I'd imagine. So, any takers?
Sure, I can take a stab at it.
Thanks, Sunil.
Yeah, I think that you know, and there's a lot to unpack there, but you know, I think platforms in general, where you're bringing parties within the same segment, connecting to other parties in related segments to allow them to transact in a much more efficient and a much more transparent way, I think is going to be a general trend, and that's you know, not just in legal technology, but also the way you know, retailers as a whole deal with wholesalers, and how construction companies thinking about Marcus, construction companies deal with subcontractors and trying to standardize things using technology and platforms to do that inherently creates transparency. You know, whether the blockchain is part of that solution, you know, I think you know, adding blockchain to any sort of tech idea or platform is very kind of 2018, 2019, really as a way to generate interest in a particular opportunity. I think that time has passed now, where you're seeing really you know, only viable technologists left in the market that are developing real solutions using blockchain. And I think, given the you know, kind of solutions around immutability, I think blockchain could absolutely be used in legal tech sector. It just really depends on you know, it could be extremely interesting around evidence gathering and things that are tangential to the legal process. So I'm not sure necessarily that blockchain is the solution, but as a whole, platforms that connect and connect various parties within a certain sector and segment, and create transparency around transactions in that particular sector. I think will be common themes as we move forward.
Great, thank you, Sunil. Let's try a poll right now. Oh, I'm sorry, Marcus, you wanted to address that, please?
Yeah, just a quick answer from my side. I understand the question also as an inquiry on standardizing mediation and arbitration procedures. Now, the quick response to that is no two disputes are alike. And therefore, although I see a certain benefit in standardizing, it makes the process more transparent, it makes it easier, it gives you less of a choice. But because no two disputes are alike, you always want to have that room to maneuver and address the particularities of a dispute. And therefore, I wouldn't favor standardizing mediation and arbitration procedures.
Thank you. So let's go to that poll, and I am going to queue up the poll, and then I will ask the audience to submit their responses, and we'll see what the responses were. So, have you seen the poll yet? Here we go. We've got quite a few responses coming in. I'm going to let it run for a few more minutes. Okay, I think I'm going to close the poll shortly. Though I see quite a few responses, I'm closing the poll. And so, the poll: which factor will now be a major driver in client selection of lawyers to resolve their disputes? The overwhelming choice so far has been C, smart strategies to achieve early resolution of the dispute. As a matter of fact, the numbers keep coming in on that one, though, followed by expertise And in the third place, the offer of creative fee structures. So thank you for that. Let's talk about creative fee structures a little bit. Jihad, in Saudi Arabia, are clients asking you to get creative with fee structures? I mean, you've got a new VAT tax there. You know, this is a time that most people are conserving their cash. So maybe you could let us know.
Well, definitely, and we are trying to be creative in terms of our fee structures. However, it's important to look at what the client is trying to achieve and whether you have the expertise, and then also put a fee structure that makes sense also to the firm. It's the finding the balance is very difficult, but we've been seeing certain arrangements, and we have certain arrangements where you have mixed retainers with success fees, or you have a more heavy success fee and a less retainer, and that's within the context of dispute resolution. Now, definitely creative fee structure is important, but I think personally it's your lawyer's expertise on the subject matter that should drive their decision. And Marcus, I know perhaps you'll agree and disagree at the same time, given your experience with engaging external counsel, because the best lawyer out there might be too expensive for the dispute itself and for what's at stake. So it also depends on the dispute itself. So it's always a challenging topic, but I think expertise is the most important factor that should be taken into consideration, and definitely not the fees.
Thank you, Jihad, for that answer. Let me go to another question. We have quite a few here. This is one we always hear in every session. And again, it'll be an open question, and maybe everybody can answer that. This comes from Mohammed Amra. To which extent will the use of technology, and I think this is supposed to be artificial intelligence, affect the human presence in the legal practice? A robot arbitrator may replace a lot of human arbitrators. So please, if Linda, maybe you with the arbitration center can answer that one first, and then we'll go to Jihad and Marcus and our other panelists when they come back.
Yeah, Mohammed, interesting question. And as you would know, I know, knowing you well, this has crept into a lot of the recent discussion. Do you know what? I don't think it's going to creep into the really meaningful areas. There's still a need for that and expertise. In the poll that we've just done came in quite high as well. There's still that need for that nuanced solution that's based upon knowing your client, knowing and having EQ about your client, getting EQ about the opponent. So technology will do amazing things, I think, in sifting through information, in just getting in allowing lawyers to distill some issues based upon that information. So really getting it down to a core lot. But I still think the call on things, the judgment, the strategy, that nuanced strategy based upon parties' positions, I don't think that's a robot. I think that remains a skillful lawyer who has had the benefit of a wide range of sophisticated tools to distill the information from which they can make an informed judgment call, an informed opinion to their client. So I just think that the robot is just not going to do that. I do believe in EQ, and I think it drives a lot, and I think it drives a lot of very clever solutions for disputes. So, and I thought, you know, I lead a court. Those judges, they still do an amazing job, and they always will, because they call it well. So I'm, you know, there's a whole, as I've said, there's a whole bunch of things that technology will do brilliant on, but that last nuance call, I don't think so. I think that's still with that extremely skilled lawyer with the benefit of those tools.
Thank you for that, Linda. Sunil, maybe we could get your perspective, being a lawyer now in venture capital, looking at technology investing. You know, the question was about artificial intelligence and robo judges replacing the human element in the practice of law and adjudication. You know, we see in Silicon Valley a lot of algorithms used to be predictive, et cetera. What's your perspective on this? Are lawyers going to lose their jobs? Are we moving to a singularity in the legal profession as well?
You know, I tend to, you know, I think I agree with Linda's point. I think, you know, technology will, like other large industries, whether it be financial services, construction, education, and other similar large verticals, I think will still be there to enable more efficient, more effective delivery of the service, and that will happen over time. You know, I think we're still a ways away from, you know, a robo judge, you know, handing down decisions. You know, but will you know, will there be software that will, you know, based on an abundance of data, you know, an AI driven, be able to perhaps, you know, and this is in the criminal context, be able to issue sentences, you know, being able to be perhaps unbiased or and do something like that. That's a completely different story. I think, you know, and I think that has nothing to do with really the legal industry. It's more about where AI is in terms of its progression. And I think, you know, I think we like to throw around AI and ML fairly freely in the technology world, but really. You know, I think we're well away from having AI technology that can replicate, you know, the human brain, which you know, took thousands and thousands of years to develop. So I think, you know, I think we will have solutions that enable the better, more cost-effective, transparent delivery of legal services, and that could be, from a lawyer's perspective, that could be dispute resolution, but I don't think we're quite there yet in terms of replacing lawyers wholesale.
We're getting near the end of our session today, and I want to put out one question to all the panelists to answer, no holds barred. Given your area of practice, of expertise, Rosanna's coming back just in time for this. Can you give us one prediction, one bold prediction, if we get together next year, what you would see happening in the practice of law in Saudi, in the construction disputes, in the venture capital in the GCC region, or in the knowledge industry? And Linda, from your perspective, looking across the region. So I don't know who would like to start. Jihad, maybe we could start with you.
Yes, I think we will see a lot of improvement in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, and looking at dispute resolution, or with a focus on dispute resolution, we'll see that the COVID-19 situation right now has accelerated the use of technology in the justice system, and we will see that many of the services provided in person in courts will be provided remotely. It will be something that we will touch and feel. Also, I think there will be an improvement in how to use technology towards due process and achieving justice. As we stand right now, we see sometimes that the use of technology sometimes is an attempt to replace an in-person hearings or attendance or matters that require that in human interaction, direct interaction, replaced with electronic submissions, which sometimes in certain examples may impact the quality of the product of the courts, I see that we will be overcoming that issue in the next year or so. Technology platform improving with the COVID-19 situation, and also more understanding of how technology could be a facilitator and the human interaction with that technology working all together to achieve justice and dispute resolution.
Very good. Marcus, anything from you? A prediction?
Yes, I'm grabbing an idea I saw that was raised by Fatima in the discussion. The future will not be about a conflict between lawyers on one hand and robots or artificial intelligence on the other. It will be a conflict between lawyers who use artificial intelligence on one side and lawyers who don't use it on the other. But coming back to your question, I think it will still be too soon if we meet next year. I think because of these other preoccupations, these other concerns that we, the end users, the contractors, the developers, are going through, this huge paradigm shift that goes beyond just the use of technology in disputes. We will go through a lot of changes in the industry, like Jihad highlighted, but we will actually only feel those substantial changes with regard to technology. I do see that the changes are progressing very quickly, and the standard example that is being used is not from the field of law, but I mean, people openly admit that a computer that has a much larger database of images of skin cancers, far more able to detect skin cancer because it can resort to this larger database than any highly experienced skin doctor. And although I very much like to agree with what Linda said earlier, that I do still want to see us humans involved, I do see us also frail and biased. And I do see that in the long term, not next year, but in many years, our role will take that into account. And there where we can be replaced by machines, we'll be much more focused on analyzing data. They will have that position and role.
Thank you, Marcus. Linda, any bold prediction from you?
Bold prediction. I think, and I mentioned this earlier, and I see the results of that last poll coming in about that it's too early to tell if COVID-19 will permanently change the way legal services are delivered. I completely agree with that. My prediction is things have changed, but things were changing anyway. I do think. I saw it more in commercial litigation than I saw it in arbitration. I saw it, interestingly, in mediation as well, but I saw arbitration lagging a little bit on that. So I do think there was change anyway. My prediction is the, and I mentioned this before, is the precipitous early movers in a very big way on technology, to put technology into everything just for the sake of it. I don't think that's the way to go. I think the more successful businesses who come out of this, and the legal service providers and the lawyers, are those who will just listen to clients, consult with them about how they're starting to make decisions. Is it less on a principled basis and more on a cost-benefit analysis? And work with them and put technology into that and bring it out in a very nuanced way. And not really slowly. I'm not saying that it should be delayed, but I do think that it's not the solution for everything. It has to be a slave to you, not a slave to it. And clever use of technology will be brilliant. And those who wait and see and inject it where it's really needed and cleverly, and lawyers who have that flexibility, that's my prediction. They will be the people who will come out of this, I think, in an extremely good way. And I think will be the leaders in the legal profession as to how technology is to be used and can benefit clients.
Sunil? can we ask you for a prediction?
Sure. I think in terms of context, typically with, technology, adoption of technology and changing of consumer behavior patterns, consumer-owned businesses, it's often, the fight, it's between push and pull, is a technology solution so amazing, so efficient, so effective, so transparent that it pulls people in, or is something like a macro event like COVID-19 pushing people to a solution. And I think, while particularly in Saudi Arabia, which we've seen over the last few years, there was, a pull in terms of using technology, not just in the legal industry, but, in business and in fintech, in health. And now you're getting that push effect with COVID-19. So I really do think a year from now, we will see, hopefully, whether it's, mostly driven by push, at least for the next 6 to 12 months, you will see things, more use of, virtual dispute resolution, more technology, less people in offices, so a more heavy reliance on software, because the day-to-day interactions with people will still not really go back to normal probably until 2021. And so I do think, if we were to meet and do this a year from now, you will definitely see, like, not just in the tech sector, but not just in the legal tech sector, but just generally, you're going to see, contactless digital solutions in the legal industry, in construction, in health, in fintech. And I think that's a trend that will be sticky as people realize that the benefits far outweigh the risks in most cases. And where those risks outweigh the benefits, people will go back to the old ways of doing things.
Thanks, Sunil. I'm going to make one prediction, and we didn't talk much about litigation funding. I know Marcus turned to that. I think given the liquidity crisis that this has caused, we're going to see large funders turn into non-bank finance corporations. And I think that has already happened. You're going to see law firms that are turning to these pools of capital that invest in disputes and looking for non-bank working capital to be secured against litigation cases. You're going to see corporates like contractors who are going to look at that as another form of liquidity. And I think you're going to see people who are looking at disputes, and disputes are very much on the rise, unfortunately, and we have force majeure now coming, looking at how they can monetize those. So I thank you for allowing me to take the liberty to put my own prediction in there. I also want to thank all our panelists. Unfortunately, we lost Rosanna, so thank you, Rosanna, wherever you went off to. Thank you, Sunil, very much. Always a pleasure. Marcus, thank you. Jihad, thank you so much. We could spend hours talking with you about what's going on the ground. And Linda, I want to thank you very much, because none of this would be possible without the support of the Arbitration Center and the courts, and your guidance and leadership. And I'd like to turn it over to you for a few closing words, and maybe you could tell the community what we have next, in line next as well. So thank you.
Dylan, thank you. That's very generous, way too generous of you, but thank you very much. And it's through our collaboration with Phoenix Advisors that these knowledge series have started. So I've seen some terrific comments and questions there, and I really do want to thank the audience for their participation. I think those questions in particular allowed us to provide some insightful comments, and particularly from Jihad, Marcus, Sunil and Rosanna, who really are breathing Saudi Arabia in particular, and to them, I'm so grateful for your time and for your insights for our audience. What you can look forward to is our next edition, which is the Lagos edition. After that will be New York, London, and back to Abu Dhabi at the end of the year. This will remain an open dialogue. This remains unscripted, as it has been today, although you could see that we have questions. But the idea is for us to, if you like, is to provoke some ideas, is to get some thought leadership into this, and if you like, is to see what you all think about where the legal industry is going, where those various topics that we've touched on that are associated with it are going. We've launched this series at an extraordinary time, and as we've all of the panelists have just said, a year from now, is that the time that we should sit down and work out what has happened? It will be interesting a year from now, and I think we should do that again. But please, you'll receive information from us about the next editions, and please do join in, because they will, almost all of them we expect will be by webinar. So we look forward to your views, we look forward to your participation, and it will, as I've said, it will remain as interactive as possible, and please keep the dialogue going afterwards. So thank you so much. And to the panelists, Dilip, thank you very much for your support. We're really looking forward to the next edition in Lagos.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Linda.
Thank you, Bana.
For attending.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Your feedback.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Bye.